story, not only here on Salam Media, but I should imagine on other platforms as well, locally and globally, is Ramaphosa heading to Washington to obviously have talks with Trump, not only regarding the white genocide claims that have been made against South Africa, but other issues as well. And we are going to be looking at how successful we believe these talks will be. Is it going to be a diplomatic balancing act or the first swing in a high stakes political tee off? And Trump being as impulsive and bombastic as he does realize, he knows he wields a lot of power. Is South Africa going, is it going to be a win-win situation? Is he going to trample all over Cyril Ramaphosa? And is his trump card going to be the case that South Africa has brought against Israel and Netanyahu at the ICJ? Is that the trump card he will hold? So lots and lots of questions regarding this matter. I'm so very pleased to have Dr. Advocate Nasreen Sheik-Peremanov. She's a human rights lawyer based in South Africa, and we're going to allow her to weigh in on these issues and, of course, the talking point of not only today, but the days ahead. Assalamu alaikum to you, Dr. Advocate Nasreen Sheik-Peremanov. I'm so pleased to have you on the show this morning. Thank you for your time.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khairan for having me on.
Okay, so let's look at how this is all going to play out with the meeting of Trump and his delegation of 4 other ministers, bearing in mind that John Steenhuisen is going to be a part of that entourage. What are our expectations of this meeting?
Well, I think one has to be very mindful of the history of South Africa. And the history of South Africa for us dictates a very different position, speaking specifically to one of apartheid. And when one has sight of that, then one is also very mindful of the fact that what happened last year, what happened the last 2 years, was incredibly difficult for the ANC. And so it's important to play out and to bring forward to the international community an almost united front, a front that demonstrates and shows that all South Africans are equal and they're all one. But also equally important to demonstrate to the Trump administration in light of the so-called actually almost ridiculous genocide against and discrimination against and crimes against humanity against and so forth, the minority of white Afrikaners in South Africa. One has to show a very united front. So the idea is to ensure that the government of national unity, which the administration hates to be called, but indeed is true, shows its face in that regard. And therefore, it is important to ensure that the international community, especially the Trump administration, is able to see that this is something which will play itself out on the golf course if it must, or at the Oval Room at the White House. So it just depends on how this goes forth. No wonder as to what role the DA will play. No wonder as to what role the golfers will play, because really that this is literally, it's almost like mudslinging. It's almost like two children playing in a sandbox, and one of them throws sand in one's face, and the other one's hurls back, and this is what the reaction seems to be, not the response, the reaction. And there are so many nuances with regards to what Trump is doing right now. It's a backdrop of a litany of facts, a litany of events that has now come to this point.
From the time Trump has taken office, he has been ruling and making all sorts of signing of all sorts of executive orders and even threatening different governments uh, around the world. If they don't toe the line, there will be repercussions. We do know, and I'm just going to digress ever so slightly here, that Russia and Ukraine had some talks in Turkey, recent talks that were held in Turkey, and it seems as if the talks didn't go the way Zelensky had expected. His claims are that Russia is making demands that were not on the table before, and they're wanting more territory. They also want Ukraine to give up their idea of being part of NATO. They want Ukraine to forget about all of those notions of theirs. Do you think that Trump will now play a part in trying to resolve that matter as well? Initially, it started out as if he was listening to Putin, and then he was listening to Zelensky. There was that disastrous meeting at the White House with Zelensky where he was insulted and embarrassed by Trump. Do you think things will change now that they've had some peace talks in Turkey? And even though we're talking about the South African visit to the White House, um, we know that there's lots of other meetings that Trump is having with world leaders around the country, around the world, rather. What does that say about him and how he's pushing so hard on other world leaders as how they should be running their countries and the policies that they should be adopting, which will be favorable to the United States?
It's very interesting you should say that, because one of the things that he said a few months ago was nothing will happen. There will be no peace in Russia until I step in. That was the audacious statement he actually made. In his mind, he truly believes, despite the relationship, he has a relationship of love and hate. The Putin administration and the Trump administration have a very weird, a very awkward relationship. Whereas they do understand they need each other, on the other hand, they will vie politically, and they will vie to the point where it would lead to utter embarrassment. And in this instance, it really is a resurrection of many communist ideals and the former USSR, with Trump wanting to say no, 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 as the so-called de facto head of NATO. We will ensure that democracy comes to the former USSR, and we're talking about a Western informed democracy. And Putin, on the other hand, very strongly putting his feet down and saying, no, with real force, literally and figuratively, we will maintain a cultural and political order that we have been accustomed to, as is colloquially known with Mother Russia. Now, this is something that one has to be very, very mindful of, because the very same thing happened with Brexit and many other institutions and organizations, regionally so, wanting to revert and retract to nationalism as opposed to a belief of a global order. So that must be borne in mind. And you asked the question about tariffs and the various agreements that are occurring via the Trump administration. To last week, yes, 2 3 nights ago, as early as that, North Americans were complaining about the tariffs and the hikes on their goods within the country itself. And there was a conversation about the manufacturers of the Barbie doll enterprise. Uh, and literally, Trump had given 100% tariff on his homeland to the manufacturers. It
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So, let alone what's happening throughout the world and the trade tariffs being levied against all countries, China, for one. And then, of course, South Africa, two of the BRICS nations, two of the leading founding BRICS members. So, this is not something that we take lightly, and we do see it as a war on all fronts. However, at the very same time, you must understand that the impulsive Trump regime is something that we have to keep in mind. That doesn't always make sense. And it makes sense later on when he has to recant, or when he has to sort of say that, look, I do need you. Look, I do need your country for X, Y, Z. South Africa is renowned for its fruit. South Africa is renowned for its gold exportation. So those exports must be kept in mind as well. And as we keep them in mind, we understand that Western Europe, North America, unfortunately rely upon us very heavily. And in their reliance, one has to give way at some point in time.
Okay, I go back to the point or the issue that I raised with Zelensky's visit a couple of months ago to the White House and how he was berated very embarrassingly by Trump. Trump, I say this over and over and over again, that he does think he's God Almighty. I'm kind of wondering how he's going to receive Ramaphosa and the South African entourage to the States. And I have no doubt in my mind that three very important issues will be coming up, and how Ramaphosa and our South African entourage should be prepared for that. Number one, it will be the issue around the supposed white genocide that's playing out in South Africa, resulting in 49 South Africans having supposedly taken refugee status in the United States. I'm sure there's a long list of other people who want to follow suit. Number two will be, not necessarily in that order, but will be the dispelling or the discharging or the firing of Ibrahim Rasool, our ambassador at the time, the South African ambassador to the United States. And then, of course, the all important one, which I believe you are a human rights lawyer, and this is where you will definitely have keen insight and interest, is the issue of South Africa having taken Netanyahu and genocidal Israel, apartheid Israel, to the ICC and the ICJ. And it seems, of course, Trump is a big supporter of Israel and Netanyahu.
Of course, that is indeed cast in stone, and that is never going to change. One of the biggest reasons why Trump is behaving in the manner that he is behaving and lashing out against South Africa is precisely because of that. Rightfully, as you mentioned as well, the literally the return of ambassador for to the to the US, Ibrahim Rasool, returning him to South Africa is something that no head of state should actually do. A head of state in international law should actually be able to do something like that when there is a threat to peace, not on the basis of a personality clash or political interests. That is not the way international relations works. That is not the way the Vienna Convention actually teaches nation states how to behave. Now, one of the other important factors you mentioned was the fact that South Africa went before the ICJ and sought an order against Israel. Trump has repeatedly stated in no uncertain terms that he supports Israel. He's also mentioned that he would make Jerusalem the capital. He's also mentioned that Israel belongs to the Israelites. Now, he talked about this very openly, and he says this on all platforms, whether it be his social media platform, whether it be a media platform, whether it be in foreign, it does not matter. He maintains his stance, and he's consistent in that. So when he sees President Ramaphosa coming in there, he's going to be gearing up for something else altogether. He really is going to be gearing up for a war across the table. And this is
Sure.
warring politics. And that's
Mhm.
going to be very, very difficult. But what we have in our favor is our head of state and his sense of calm and his sense of collectivity and his sense. The president of South Africa has a history of beautiful negotiations that have ended very, very well. The manner in which he handles this is indeed exemplary as far as diplomacy is concerned. So, no doubt, he will handle this quite well. Through embarrassment, through attempted embarrassment, through ridicule, whatever the case may be, he will come out shining. He will most certainly come out shining. It's not going to
The
be a Zelensky.
I think uh, cl- all the world's eyes will be on these meetings, undoubtedly, very especially us here in South Africa with absolute bated breath. I just want to also make a reference to the time when the ambassador from the ambassador to South Africa from the United States, Ambassador Brigitte, if you remember that incident, where he reported very openly to the media about a ship that actually landed in Simonstown, and of course, the he didn't say it out in so many words, but he alluded to the fact that there was something untoward with that ship having docked at Simonstown, possibly also to the fact that there were lots of armaments on that particular ship. That created a bit of a storm in the teacup, but we here in South Africa were very level headed about it. The government at the time didn't react the way Trump reacts regarding these situations. So, yes, as you've indicated, Ramaphosa has been very sober-minded in the and very diplomatic in the way he interacts with other heads of state, and even as the head of government here in South Africa. As a human rights lawyer, what do you make of the action taken? Uh, the Loftus Versfeld Five, as they are now being uh, uh, referred to. Uh, a child was involved. A couple of older people were involved as well. They were, in fact, arrested at that soccer match simply because they had a couple of placards and showing support for Palestine. Were their human rights not being violated? And where do they stand on this matter? Can they counter sue SAPS and whoever else was involved in having given the order for them to be thrown into jail?
Oh, undoubtedly, undoubtedly. And when you are watching the Trump and the Ramaphosa tee off, do what Putin does. Keep your box of popcorn very close by so you can watch the antics of the Trump administration reacting and not responding. On your question specifically, though, there would be an action brought that would lie within the activists themselves. One of the fundamental rights that we have within our constitution is the right to freedom of expression. And this is done within limits, of course. One may manifestly express one's thoughts, one's beliefs, one's opinions, one's support, and so forth within limits. And those limits basically means I will not harm you when I am now standing there with my placard. So when we look at the arrests that have taken place, what we do understand in no uncertain terms that this is in all likelihood a matter that will probably go to the Supreme Court of Appeal and not just stop at the High Court, because it does demand an examination of what the borders, what the parameters of freedom of speech actually are. But having said that, we know for a fact, as with any common person in the street, this is a slam dunk. There is absolutely no right thinking judge who would say that these persons ought to be detained. One in this country can do anything. One can actually scream out from the treetops. One can do anything apart from inciting treason. So that is something that we must keep in mind. And the very fact that South Africa brought the matter to the ICJ is already proof of that. The very fact that South Africa is making submissions to the ICC, that is indeed proof of that as well. So individual freedoms cannot be curtailed in favor of what the society at that point in time thinks. We must also keep in mind that when there was the matter with the South African flag, the old flag being
Mm.
hoisted, that was really an issue. But the courts actually took it in its stride and said, well, you can actually keep your flag, but at home, please.
Mhm.
Because this is a representation of something far wider. Whereas with regards to placards, that does not fall into the same category. So there would definitely be a case that could be made against SAPS for this.
Once again, I'm going to bring up the ICC and the ICJ matters that we, South Africa, has taken on behalf of the Palestinian people and wanting all of these genocidal maniacs to be brought to account. Do you think that part of these negotiations is going to, Trump is going to try and strong arm Ramaphosa and the contingent that's going along with him to possibly drop these charges? Is there even the vaguest possibility that he might try that trick or either threaten them or with his very strong arm tactics, threaten our South African contingent to drop the charges against Netanyahu and the other people involved, collaborators in the genocide on the Palestinian people?
In all likelihood, he would, as ludicrous as it may sound, he actually would. Not realizing, well, of course, we must keep in mind as well that the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, is the judicial arm of the United Nations. And we must also keep in mind that the United Nations Security Council funds the functioning of the ICJ. And thereafter, we must also understand that the Trump administration is a big contributor. So
Right.
threats will be made along those lines that we will hold, and threats will be made as well that we will continuously not support the US aid funding. But the short sightedness, the myopia there is really that literally 16% of of US aid deals with antiretrovirals and HIV treatment and so forth. So there's a myopia that you don't rule the world. You might think you rule the world, but you actually don't rule the world. You might want to be the Secretary General of the United Nations and tell everybody how to behave, but you ought to look in your own backyard first before you decide to leave home, and make sure your passport is in order, because there might be a lot of people looking out there for you and wanting to declare you a persona non grata. And this is something that's often forgotten. When we look at for example, if we look at the ceasefire breakdown now in Hamas, with between Hamas and the Israelites, we look at them specifically. Biden was the one who commenced those negotiations. It was not the Trump administration. He began that. And he started that along with the Qataris, and he decided that, all right, fine, we should do something about it. But the wisdom was there. Include people in your backyard. Include those people who understand and who are regionally close to the conflict, to the war itself. And therefore, the Middle East was represented by Qatar. So one has to look at this very circumspectly and
Mm,
understand that indeed, yes, he's going to try every trick in the book. And it's going to be a little childish negotiation. I'll give you a lolly if you give me the whole slab of
mm,
chocolate. Can't be
absolutely.
disproportionate. Just one way.
Mm. The sacking of Karim Khan from the ICJ, what sort of message do you believe that has sent to the rest of the world? I mean, it was based on a sexual harassment charge. and he's now no longer going to be on that board. Um, does that give us any hope? What does it do to our case at the ICJ?
Well, the ICJ as a body itself will make up its mind independently, but one has to also be careful of the fact that they are being supported, like I said, about certain
Mm.
power by certain powers,
Hmm.
and weighing of the decision is may go one way or the other. We also need to be mindful of the fact that when I was at the ICJ, I can say this at the Peace Palace itself, I can say this in no uncertain terms that there are real instances of misdemeanors of different gravity that actually occur. And there are some misdemeanors that actually do not occur at all. They do not occur at all. Like when one looks at if you and I had to, for example, take the Indo-Pak conflict as it is right now, what veracity is there that Pakistan actually launched the attacks? Who
Hmm.
has? So did it actually occur? Did it actually occur, or was it a political move to get the former justice to actually step down? So, is it
Right.
something that that has been framed, that has been set up, that has been made out to be in such a manner that this is now an indictment against Karim, and Karim has to go because Karim has done X, Y, Z, A, B, and C? But that then affects the judicial balancing and the thinking. We already know that at the helm there is the Chief Justice went totally against us in our first rulings.
Hmm.
Repeat. So now that's going to play a role as well. So we have to look at it from a multifaceted point of view in terms of how politics plays itself out in the judicial environment.
Okay, we need to wrap up now. A quick question that I need to get in, and if you could just respond to them both. Are you hopeful regarding our case at the ICJ, number one? And are you hopeful that the South African delegation meeting with Trump is going to be positive for us as South Africa?
No and yes, respectively. Very, very. I can say to you right now, and this is what the sad, that no matter what the ICJ does, it can't enforce its decision. So it doesn't matter what it does. It can't enforce the decision. And the entire world knows exactly what's going on. The global community is full well aware as to what's transpiring. So they do understand what needs to be done. But nobody has the guts
Mm.
to actually do something about it. And of course, with our head of state going across the Atlantic, it's going to be smooth sailing for him, but not so much for the Trump administration, because our president has the ability to smile and has skillful negotiation skills in the face of foolishness.
Okay, that's where we're going to leave it. Dr. Advocate NazreenShaik-Peremanov, human rights lawyer, talking to us about the upcoming visit of Ramaphosa and entourage to the White House. It is exactly 9:35. Our next guest is standing by, so please stay with us.